Let me ask you a question that most financial advice quietly avoids. If someone told you that turning 40 might actually be the best time to start investing, would you believe them? Probably not, because for years you've heard the same message repeated everywhere. Start early, start young, start in your 20s, and if you didn't, you're already behind. But there is something strange about that story. It assumes that a 25-year-old with unstable income, unclear goals, and limited life experience is somehow better prepared to invest wisely than a 40-year-old who has already survived 2 decades of real life. Think about that for a moment. At 25, most people are still trying to figure out their career. At 40, many people finally understand how money actually works in their lives. They've seen financial mistakes. They've learned what matters and what doesn't. And that kind of clarity is not a disadvantage. It's an advantage, if you know how to use it. Today, I want to show you something different. Not complicated financial strategies, not stock-picking tricks, but 5 principles of investing after 40 that quietly shape the lives of people who build real financial security in the second half of life. And the last principle may be the most important one most people never hear about. There's a particular moment that happens somewhere between the ages of 38 and 45. It's rarely dramatic. No alarm sounds, no announcement is made. But something changes inside your mind. You begin to realize that time is no longer an unlimited resource. Retirement stops being an abstract idea. Suddenly, it becomes a real horizon. You start asking different questions. How much do I actually need? Where should my money go? Have I waited too long? For many people, this realization creates 2 very different reactions. Some people rush into investing. They open accounts, buy random stocks, follow market news obsessively. Others do the opposite. They freeze. They think, I should have started earlier. Maybe it's too late now. Both reactions are understandable, but neither one leads to good decisions. Because investing after 40 is not about speed. It's about sequence. And everything begins with something most financial videos skip completely. Step 1. Fix the foundation first. There's an old story from ancient Babylon about a craftsman named Daban. Daban worked hard every day. He was respected in his town. Yet by the time he reached middle age, he had almost nothing saved. One day, he went to the wisest man in the city and asked a simple question. Why does money always pass through my hands but never stay? The wise man didn't ask about his investments. He asked about his debts. Daban began listing them. Credit owed to merchants, loans taken during difficult years, money borrowed to solve problems that seemed urgent at the time. By the time he finished speaking, he realized something uncomfortable. Before his income could build anything, his debts had already taken their share. And that lesson still applies today. If you are paying 20% interest on credit cards but investing in something that earns 8%, you are running a machine that quietly destroys your money. The first step in investing after 40 is not exciting. It is simply this: remove the financial weight that pulls you backward. Pay down high-interest debt. Not all at once, not through dramatic sacrifice, just with consistent progress. Because eliminating expensive debt is often the highest guaranteed return available. And once the foundation stops leaking, the rest of the structure finally has a chance to stand. Step 2, build the safety net. Imagine 2 investors. Both start investing at age 40. Both put money into the same investments, but there is one difference. The first investor has an emergency fund. The second one doesn't. 2 years later, something unexpected happens. A medical expense, a job transition, a broken car engine. The second investor is forced to sell investments at the worst possible moment, not because the strategy failed, but because life demanded cash. This is one of the most common reasons people believe investing doesn't work. But the investment didn't fail. The preparation did. There's a story told in rural farming communities about a farmer who kept one barn separate from all the others. Every harvest, he stored a small portion of grain there. His neighbors thought it was wasteful. That grain could have been sold. It could have produced profit. But one year, an early winter destroyed crops across the region. Farmers were forced to sell livestock and borrow money to survive. The man with the separate barn did none of those things. He simply opened the doors and continued his life as planned. An emergency fund is that separate barn, 3 to 6 months of living expenses, money that exists for only one purpose, to protect everything else. Step 3, use the free money most people ignore. Now something interesting happens. Once your foundation is stable and your safety net exists, investing becomes surprisingly simple. But many people overlook one of the easiest advantages available to them: employer retirement matches. If your company offers a retirement plan that matches your contributions, something remarkable happens. Every dollar you invest is immediately increased, sometimes by 50%, sometimes 100%. There are almost no investments in the world that offer an instant return like that. Yet millions of people never claim it, not because they refuse, but because they never pause long enough to understand how powerful it is. Imagine walking past a table every month. On that table sits money with your name on it. All you have to do is reach out and take it, but most people walk by without noticing. Employer retirement matches are exactly that: free money, waiting quietly. Step 4, simplicity wins more often than genius. At this point, many people believe the hard part begins: choosing investments, researching stocks, predicting markets. But something surprising has been discovered over decades of financial research. Professional investors with advanced tools and teams of analysts often fail to beat something very simple: index funds. Funds that simply track the overall market, not trying to outsmart it, not trying to predict it, just participating in it. This sounds boring, and in many ways it is. But boring is often powerful, because every time someone tries to outsmart the market, they introduce risk, emotion, and cost. Over time, those things quietly eat away at returns. The most successful long-term investors rarely look impressive in the short term. They simply follow a simple system: a diversified portfolio, automatic contributions, patience. And then they allowed time to do what time does best: compound growth. Step 5, the real enemy is not the market. Here is the final truth that surprises most people. The biggest threat to your investment success after 40 is not the economy. It is not inflation. It is not even market crashes. The biggest threat is you, human psychology. There's an entire field called behavioral finance dedicated to studying this, and the findings are incredibly consistent. When markets are rising, people feel confident. They invest more. When markets fall, people panic. They sell. In other words, they buy high and sell low, not because they lack intelligence, but because human emotions are powerful. There's a small story that explains this perfectly. A young man planted an orchard. He watered the trees carefully, he chose excellent soil, but every few weeks he dug up the roots to check if they were growing. His neighbor watched this with concern. Finally, he said, "The roots know what they are doing. Every time you dig them up, you interrupt the process." The young man stopped digging. Years later, his orchard flourished. Investing works the same way. Once the system is planted, your job is not to interfere with it constantly. It is to allow it to grow. The real advantage of investing after 40. When you are 40, something unique happens. You may not have as much time as someone who started at 20, but you often have something far more valuable: experience. You understand your spending habits. You understand risk. You understand what truly matters in life. And investing is not just about time, it's about behavior. People who invest successfully are not always the smartest. They are the most consistent, the most patient, the least reactive. And those qualities often appear later in life. the question that matters most. So here is the real question. Not whether you started at 20, not whether you feel behind, but this: are you willing to start now? Because wealth rarely comes from perfect timing. It comes from consistent action over time. Clear the foundation, build the safety net, collect the advantages already available to you. Keep your strategy simple, and most importantly, get out of your own way. Do that, and the next 20 years can look very different from the last 20 years. And sometimes that's all it takes: a decision made today that quietly changes the direction of the rest of your life. If this perspective helped you think about money differently, comment "Freedom Plan" below, because the moment you start thinking differently about money is often the moment your financial future begins to change.